All I have to say is my name is...
Yep, that's all. Hey guys, welcome to the Vapor Store. I'm Jacob.
And I'm CJ.
And you're watching Vaping for Dummies. So in the previous video, Trent and I went over the basics of vaping. We went over the types of mods and tanks, what goes into nicotine, and what all goes into juice as well. In the future, we just want to go more into depth on that. So if there's anything that you guys have that you want to add, or if there's any questions that you have for the future, please let us know down in the comments below.
So today we're going to be talking about rebuildable dripping atomizers, or RDAs. Unlike traditional tanks, you have pre-built coils, you have mesh coils, or you can build your own. With RDAs, you have to vape on a little bit less juice, so you're going to drip it every 6 to 10 hits, usually with about 6 to 10 drops of juice. But you can tinker a little bit with it more and change it if you want to get a better flavor out of a specific juice or clouds. So if you're looking for something a little bit different or a little bit more in depth, check out RDAs.
So when building an RDA, there's a few materials that you have to get together first. First of all, you need the RDA. Without it, it's pretty impossible. Secondly, you need your kanthal and cotton. We recommend that you use strip cotton just because it helps manipulate the device later on, but you can go to your local CVS, Walgreens, pick up organic cotton, and it'll work the exact same way. Lastly, you need your tools. Tools are very important. There are toolkits that you can get, but in the end, all you really need is a screwdriver, some pliers and tweezers, and you're good to go.
So step 1, cutting and wrapping your wire. You're going to need 5 to 6 inch pieces, and you don't have to measure that exactly. It just depends on how large you want your coils. The more wraps you're going to prefer, the longer you're going to want your wires. We'll take 2 of those. I would recommend holding on to the other end of your wire when you snip it so it doesn't fly and hit anyone else nearby. And you can use multiple different types of jigs. This is a simpler jig I would recommend for beginners. You can use a screwdriver if you don't want to purchase one of these, and different diameters will change the ohm. So if you have multiple small screwdrivers at home, like most people do, you could just use one of those. So for these jigs, they have some small holes at the top that you're going to feed your wire through. And if you have some small bends in the wire at the ends, it's not a big deal. You can cut those off at the end anyway. So once you have those fed through, about, say, 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 inch, go ahead and pinch it against the side. And what these knobs are going to do here is, as you rotate clockwise or counterclockwise across this jig, it's going to rotate the wire for you and wrap the coils much easier. So push this down, and just light pressure. You don't want to push too hard and make the coils overlap, but you don't want to push too lightly and have them too far apart. And as you rotate, just like I said, light pressure, and rotate slowly. Just like I said, light pressure, and rotate slowly. And as you rotate, you're going to want to count the amount of times you're going around to your preference. Most people with a smaller diameter wire prefer between 6 and 10 wraps. We'll go ahead and stop there. And you want to stop so both of your leads on your wire are even. You don't want them awkward, so when you try and put them in the RDA, you don't have any issues. And they may not come out perfect. You may have some slight spaces, but we can straighten those up later. So for our second coil, I'm going to show you how to wrap them around a screwdriver, since not everyone may have a jig or want a jig. So you're going to take about the same amount as you had on the beginner's lead and pinch that with your thumb. And when you start from there, right at the end of the screwdriver, you're going to use that as a guide and just pull your wire tight as you wrap around the screwdriver. And again, if you're making multiple coils, you're going to want to make sure that each coil has the same amount of wraps. Otherwise, you'll run into uneven firing, burning your cotton, or it might not run properly. And once you're done with screwdrivers, because they don't pull maybe as tightly as the beginner's jigs do, you can take your pliers and just compress the coil against the base of that screwdriver. Hold that for a couple of seconds, and you're good to go. So step 2 is going to be cutting and placing your coils. When you have your RDA, I prefer placing mine on top of my mod. However, when I do so, I make sure that my mod is turned off. So when I push the fire button, when I'm setting the coils, it prevents misfires or my hand being on it when it heats up and burning me. It's not something you want. It will burn the coils into your finger. Not pleasant. So you're going to want to identify your positive and negative posts on your RDA. On this one, it's fairly clearly marked. You've got a positive connection, which is going to be your gold plated, and a ground, which is going to be, or negative, which is going to be the same color as the base of my RDA. My next step is going to be placing my coils in the post holes. So you're going to have one lead in one of your negative slots and one of your leads in the positive slots. And the way this RDA runs, it requires your coils to be vertical. So I'm going to want to clip these leads to a little bit shorter and even before I put them in. And we'll want to get the second one roughly the same length to make sure that they turn out the same height. You don't want an uneven distribution of heat or vapor in here. So with my first coil, as I said, place one lead in your positive connection and one lead in your negative connection. And you want to make sure that that's as even as possible in terms of height. You don't want one side much higher than the other. And once you have it even, you're going to want to hold that in place and go ahead and tighten down your screws. So as I showed you with the first coil, we're going to do the same thing with the second. And on this one, it's a little bit more important as to how high you make it. You want to make sure it's as even as possible with the first coil you put in. And the RDA we've been using today looks a little bit different. It is the Dead Rabbit. So as I said, the post holes are vertical. Yours may be horizontal, which in that case, you're going to be not so much worried about how tall they are, but how far they come out around the side of the RDA. And when you're done with this, you want to check in the bottom here and make sure you don't have any leads sticking out or anything that might overheat and burn off and stick to the bottom of your RDA. I luckily don't have any in here, so we don't have to worry about that. And then the last step you're going to want to do is, as you can see, these are kind of crooked. You're going to want to straighten these out. So take the jig or screwdriver you used before, whatever the same diameter is. We'll just give them a light twist and straighten them out here. And there we go. And if you look at it from the side, you should see they're roughly close to the same height on both ends and evenly side to side. So step 3 is going to be heating your coils and making sure they're heating evenly and then wicking them to finish up. So at this point, you're going to want to turn your mod on, and based on your ohms that you're reading, you can change your wattage. I would recommend running it lower so they heat a little bit slower. So it's a little bit easier to read if they're heating from the center out. That is what you are looking for. So when I press the fire button, let's see how these heat. So as you can see, my coils are heating a little bit differently. This one at a little bit different rate, and we've got this one needs to be compressed a little bit, so it should keep up with the other. And if you can't get them to heat up evenly through that, you can take your jig. Again, you want to keep any metal pieces away from touching the coils if you're pressing the fire button. If you have ceramic tip tweezers, not like these, you can use them and touch the coils when you're heating it, otherwise you'll cause a short. So we'll heat these up again. We'll go ahead and take this guy, and any metal resistance against your wire should help it burn evenly. You can even drag the screwdriver across it. Try them one more time. God damn it.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
So we're still having one fire a little bit hotter than the other, so we're gonna have to tinker with it just a bit more. Compress this coil in, and you're looking for small spaces here. You want to get those as minimal as possible. There we go. So from here on out, we're gonna give them about 5 minutes to cool off before we put our cotton in there, so we don't have any burning issues or anything like that, and you get good flavor on your first few hits.
5 minutes later.
All right, so finishing up our final step here, we're gonna take a couple of strands of cotton we've got here, and I'm gonna check and make sure there's not a whole lot of dirt stuck on the outside, because you don't want to get that in your cotton when you put it in. It won't be really good flavor. The cotton we're using today is cotton bacon. We prefer it here just because the strands come out a little bit easier and they're a little bit easier to wick. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is, based on the diameter of your coils, mine are kinda small, so this would be a little too thick to fit through there. So we're just gonna peel off a little bit. And this should be enough. You don't really need a whole lot of cotton. I can cut this in half, and you can pull it and stretch it out and fluff it as you put it in. So we'll go ahead. And I cut this at an angle because you're gonna wanna twist the ends of this to make them fit through the coils a little bit easier. And like I said, just take that a little bit and fluff it out. And then we'll go ahead and take the end that we cut at an angle here and just twist it up a bit. And what that's gonna do is give me a lead to pull as I go through my coils. So once I thread it through, I'm gonna pinch the other end and just ever so slightly work it through. And you don't wanna pull too hard. You don't wanna knock those coils off from where they were. So if you need to hold on to them to get a little bit more pull, you can. And pull any extra strands you see off there. You don't want any crazy ones sticking up. So we got this side done. We'll go ahead and switch to the other. And we're just gonna repeat the same process with the clipped end. And then now that we have both of these fed, we're obviously not gonna want all of this cotton left in here. So you're gonna wanna take a pair of scissors, or most wire snips will work. They're a little bit more difficult to deal with, so I just recommend your kitchen scissors or whatever scissors you have laying around. Preferably clean. And then the way you're gonna wanna wick this is go directly to the bottom here. So extend the cotton to see how much length I need, and then extend it out. And you're gonna wanna clip these to the same length straight across. And then repeat the same thing on the opposite side. And you may not always get it perfect every time. Sometimes you gotta trim them up, or you can just pluck it out with your tweezers. So next you can use tweezers or a screwdriver to tuck, whatever you prefer. I'm gonna go ahead and use my tweezers. I'm gonna go ahead and push this down with my finger and just tuck the ends of this cotton in here. And you wanna make sure all of this gets inside the juice well of your RDA, the base here, because you don't want the top cap getting caught in it or pulling it out and dumping juice all over you. So we've got that all good to go. Now on to my final and favorite step. We're gonna go ahead and drip here Vapetasia's Peach Lemonade from their lemonade line. It's one of my favorite sweet lemonade juices. And you just wanna start by lightly going across the top. You don't wanna cover it in juice because it won't saturate extremely quickly. So add a little bit and let it soak up. And you do want to make sure that all of your cotton is completely saturated. And you want to go over those coils a couple of times and make sure all the juice soaks through. And then I just like to add a little bit down at the bottom at the end to let those tips soak up that juice that's left. And last but not least, we're going to take our top cap. This one has a top airflow design. As you can see here, the airflow is going to angle down into the top cap and onto the coils. So you're going to want to always line your airflow up with the sides of your coils just to get the most response and best vapor and flavor out of it. Push that down and make sure it's nice and tight. Make sure my device is on, and we're ready to hit it.
So as you guys can see, building an RDA is not scary at all. It's actually a lot more experimental and fun. You can have a lot more juice, a lot more flavor with it. As always guys, make sure you guys go ahead and follow all of our social media, hit that like, comment, subscribe button, and yeah.
We'll see you next time.
Peace guys.